The building shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Screams echoed through the hallways as metal doors slammed shut. A shadow crossed the threshold. She froze. One step forward, and everything she had fought for could be gone. But then, something impossible happened. Who had just entered the room? Why did her heart race even before she saw them? The shaky camera POV ran through the hallways. Echoing footsteps, mixing with distant gunfire and muted alarms, drawing the viewer directly into the chaos and fear of the moment. Asterisk, it was 1944, behind enemy lines. A group of female doctors risked everything to save the wounded. Every life mattered. Every decision could be the last. Yet, even in the chaos of war, no one anticipated what awaited them after capture. These women were not just soldiers. They were witnesses to horrors no one would record. Secrets they would carry silently for decades. But no one realized that their captors weren't after weapons. And that one simple act of mercy would change everything. Maps highlighted occupied territories while close-ups showed medical kits, blood-stained hands, and soldiers in pain. Setting the stage for the high stakes these women faced, asterisk, it started with a sudden raid. Alarm bells shattered the night. The doctors were surrounded. One of them, barely able to speak through exhaustion, tried to signal surrender, but the enemy didn't see mercy. Then a message arrived, written in code on scraps of paper. It mentioned her by name. She couldn't understand, but she knew it was a warning she could neither ignore nor explain. Who sent the message? And why her? Would anyone survive the night? Shaky close-ups captured the coded message in her trembling hands as radio static crackled in the background. Faint whispers of her name echoing in the darkened corridors. The tension mounted with every heartbeat, each second stretching longer than the last, forcing the audience to lean in and wonder what would happen next. Asterisk, the hospital descended into chaos. Every corridor seemed alive with panic, every doorway a threshold to uncertainty. Explosions ripped through nearby streets, sending tremors that rattled the walls and shook the thin plaster from the ceilings. Dust filled the air, choking the few who dared to move, while cries of the wounded and dying blended into a continuous, haunting chorus. Footsteps echoed frantically, some deliberate, some stumbling, as doctors and nurses scrambled to move patients to safer locations. One doctor, her uniform streaked with blood, carried a young soldier whose breathing was shallow and irregular. Every step felt like a gamble. One wrong move, one misplaced foot on a creaking floorboard, could reveal them to enemy patrols that prowled the perimeter like silent predators. But this wasn't the real problem. There was something far more dangerous approaching. Something that could unravel everything they had struggled to protect. In the command room, a separate layer of chaos unfolded. Radios crackled incessantly with static, voices garbled, messages overlapping, orders misheard or delayed. Officers argued over troop movements, unsure if reinforcements would arrive or if they had already walked into an ambush. Maps were strewn across tables, pins marking locations that seemed to shift with every new report, as if the lines themselves were part of some malevolent game. Meanwhile, a single envelope arrived, slipping silently across a table, containing information that would change the course of the night. Who had sent it? And what secrets did it hold? No one dared open it immediately, fearing the implications. But every second spent hesitating tightened the invisible noose around their throats. Back on the ground floor, one nurse discovered that the stairwell she intended to use was blocked debris. Fallen furniture and the bodies of the wounded made progress nearly impossible. She ducked under a hanging beam, her hands shaking, and heard a faint whisper. A warning or a taunt, she couldn't tell. In the shadows, eyes watched, calculating. Another doctor ran down the opposite corridor, clutching a medical kit that contained the only remaining supplies of morphine and bandages. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her like lead. Every decision, every motion had consequences. If she stumbled, if she hesitated for even a heartbeat, lives would be lost, and perhaps hers too. Outside, the enemy advanced with precision and silence, their movements almost ghost-like. The distant flashes of muzzle fire illuminated fleeting glimpses of uniformed silhouettes darting through alleyways. Each gunshot echoed against the walls, reverberating through the minds of those inside the hospital. A young assistant screamed as the floor shook from an explosion close by, throwing her to the ground. She felt the warmth of blood pooling beneath her cheek. But there was no time to process pain. Survival demanded immediate action. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Every sound could herald doom. But amidst all this, one question gnawed at them. Was the enemy aware of the coded message that had arrived? And if they were, how long before it would be used against them? A separate layer of tension played out in the operating room. Instruments rattled on steel trays, some sliding to the floor as frightened hands fumbled with precision tools. The patients, barely conscious, whimpered in pain, their moans punctuating the air like a grim rhythm. The lead doctor barked instructions, voice firm but trembling, directing the team to improvise. Improvisation was their only chance. Makeshift splints, hurried sutures, and whispered prayers became the tools of survival. Yet even here, uncertainty loomed. Would the walls hold if the next blast struck? Would they have time to finish saving one life before losing several others? Each second was a battlefield. Every movement a dance with death. In the hallway connecting the wards, another doctor froze. A shadow moved against the far wall, too deliberate to be random, too quick to be seen clearly. She ducked, breath caught in her throat, heart hammering in her chest, and dared to peek. Nothing. Then a creak. The sound was subtle, but unmistakable. Someone was there. Was it friend or foe? The faintest flicker of candlelight revealed a figure slipping back into the darkness. Micro cliffhangers surged through the narrative. Who was watching them? Was this a warning or the prelude to disaster? Each unanswered question ratcheted the tension higher, compelling the viewer to remain on edge, leaning forward, desperate to see what would happen next. Everything seemed to collapse at once. The air was thick with smoke, the acrid temps of burning debris mingling with the metallic scent of blood. Explosions rattled the walls and shattered windows, letting in slivers of moonlight that illuminated the chaos in harsh, fleeting flashes. The female doctors moved like shadows, slipping between overturned furniture and groaning patients, every footstep calculated, every glance a measure of survival. Reinforcements that were supposed to arrive had been delayed, leaving gaps in the defensive perimeter, and every corridor became a potential trap. The enemy advanced faster than expected, their steps silent, their tactics precise. And one wrong movement could cost the lives of everyone in the hospital. The weight of responsibility pressed on the doctors like an invisible hand. Heavy and unrelenting, a young nurse clutched a trembling soldier, whispering reassurances she didn't feel herself. Each time the soldier's eyes fluttered, the nurse's heart leaped, fearing he might die in her arms. Across the hall, the lead doctor barked instructions, voice sharp but tinged with exhaustion. Improvisation became their only weapon. Makeshift splints, hurried sutures, whispered prayers. Every action, every decision, carried consequences that could not be undone. And yet, in the midst of this chaos, there were moments of defiance and courage that shone like fragile flames against the darkness. Then came the betrayals. A supposed ally hesitated at a critical junction, leaving a patient exposed to enemy fire. Another whispered instructions that led a small group into a corridor under fire. Confusion reigned, trust was fractured, and each micro-decision could tip the balance between survival and disaster. The doctors pressed on, their focus absolute, every breath a testament to resolve. Even the faintest sound, a creak of floorboard, a distant explosion, a whisper in the shadows demanded attention. And missing any one detail could unravel their entire plan. Messages intercepted through the radio offered glimpses of enemy strategies. Yet the timing was chaotic, the information incomplete. The coded note received earlier now played a more sinister role. Its meaning had become clear. Someone was targeting the doctors specifically, tracking every movement, predicting every decision. The realization brought a wave of dread. This wasn't just an assault, it was a hunt. And the hunters were relentless. Every corridor, every stairwell, Every shadowed doorway was a potential death trap. Amid this, heroic decisions emerged. One doctor dragged a severely wounded patient to an improvised hiding place, pausing only to whisper, "I will not let them take you." Another ran a critical message through the corridors. Dodging debris and bullets alike, the weight of responsibility bending her forward but not breaking her resolve. Tiny victories punctuated the chaos. A bandage tied, a life saved, a moment of defiance against the encroaching doom. But each victory was fleeting, and the specter of failure loomed over every choice. And then, in a moment no historian could explain, a sudden shift occurred. A misstep, a fortuitous distraction, a flicker of opportunity. The enemy's momentum faltered. The doctors, exhausted and battered, seized the chance to enact a plan that had been whispered in hurried strategy sessions. A coordinated diversion to draw enemy forces away from the most vulnerable wards. The execution was precise, almost surgical in its chaos, but it came at a cost. Supplies ran out faster than anticipated. Some patients had to be left behind temporarily. Every second stretched painfully as they balanced speed, caution, and hope. Micro-dash cliffhangers pulsed continuously. Would the diversion succeed? Who among the doctors would survive this night? Was the enemy aware of the coded message's true purpose? And if so, what horrors would it unleash? Every heartbeat, every whispered instruction, every stolen glance carried the weight of the unseen. Flashbacks to moments of past triumph and past loss flickered through their minds, reinforcing their resolve while threatening to overwhelm them. And all the while, the hospital itself seemed to breathe with the tension. Walls groaned, floors trembled, windows rattled, and the flickering lights cast ghostly shadows that seemed to move with intent. Asterisk, the night finally ended. But silence carried a weight heavier than any explosion. Survivors moved cautiously through the wrecked corridors, counting their losses in quiet disbelief. The walls, scarred with impact and fire, seemed to echo the horrors that had unfolded within them. Some clutched letters torn from their pockets, fragments of diaries. Notes hastily scribbled during moments of fleeting safety. Others sank to the floor, staring at the ceiling, unable to comprehend the scale of what had happened. Even decades later, many of the doctors never spoke of that night. Their memories were sealed behind clenched jaws, silent testimonies to the atrocities they had witnessed and the impossible choices they had been forced to make. Fragments remained, though hints of truth that refused to be buried completely. A single diary hidden beneath a floorboard. A letter smuggled past enemy lines. A whispered account from a nurse who had survived the war but never told her story in full. Each fragment revealed pieces of a reality too dangerous for the world to know. Fragments that suggested betrayal, heroism, and a courage that no one could quantify. Who had survived, and why some remained silent while others spoke in whispers decades later, became a question historians could only guess at. The coded message, once a source of terror, lingered in memory. Its meaning partially decoded, but its full significance still concealed. The doctors moved through what remained of the hospital. Each step a reminder of the night that had almost claimed them. Supplies were exhausted, instruments broken, patients scattered across hidden rooms. Yet amid the devastation, there were fleeting moments of humanity. A nurse gently adjusting a bandage. A doctor murmuring reassurance to a shivering survivor. A soldier clasping the hand of the one who had saved him. These small acts of compassion became the anchors of their sanity. Fragile lights against the darkness of war, and then came the chilling truth, the secret that would haunt them forever. Certain files were destroyed, diaries hidden, evidence erased. One notebook rumored to contain names, locations, and testimonies disappeared entirely. Its contents remained locked away, leaving more questions than answers. What did it contain? Who had taken it, and why? And why, despite all they had endured, did the doctors never speak openly of the horrors they had witnessed? The questions lingered like shadows, refusing to dissipate, compelling anyone who learned of their story to wonder, to search, to probe the hidden corners of history that might never be fully revealed. The night's survivors exited into the pale light of dawn, weary, and forever changed. Their eyes bore the reflection of the chaos they had endured, a mixture of grief, defiance, and unspoken knowledge. Each one carried a story untold, a truth too dangerous or too painful to recount. And for the viewers, the most haunting realization remained: the truth about what these women saw, the horrors they endured, and the courage they displayed, is still locked in archives, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. The soft flicker of candlelight against shattered walls, the echo of distant footsteps, the rustle of hidden diaries all left a lingering sense of mystery, leaving audiences unable to look away, haunted by questions that remain unanswered, in the shadows of history. The silence of these female doctors spoke louder than any battle cry. And in the next story, one fragment of that silence, a missing notebook, would reveal a truth so shocking it could rewrite what we thought we knew about bravery, survival, and the unseen costs of war. The survivors lingered in the ruined hospital as dawn stretched pale fingers across the shattered windows. Silence had settled like a thick fog, pressing against the walls, the floors, the very air they breathed. Every creak of a beam, every rustle of debris beneath weary feet, carried the memory of what had happened hours before. Nurses and doctors, some limping, others supporting soldiers too weak to stand, moved carefully, aware that each motion, however small, was a reminder of lives lost and horrors endured. The corridors that had once been bustling with activity now felt like tombs, echoes of screams and gunfire imprinted into every corner. A young doctor knelt beside a shattered stretcher, tracing her fingers over a blood-stained notebook that had somehow survived the destruction. She felt the weight of untold stories pressing against her chest, the lives she could not save, the choices she had been forced to make in the fleeting seconds of impossible decisions. Each page whispered fragments of courage and terror, but much had been lost forever. Nearby, another nurse clutched a torn letter, the words smudged with tears, the ink faded. Even in the quiet, she could feel the pulse of history pressing into her, a reminder that some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. Outside, the morning air was sharp and cold, carrying the smell of smoke and earth. The war had left its scars on the city, on the streets, on the faces of those who survived. A group of survivors emerged cautiously from the hospital, their eyes scanning for threats, though they knew there were none. Yet the psychological toll was heavy. Each glance downward, each flinch at a distant sound, betrayed the fear that lingered in their hearts. Some whispered names of the lost, while others remained silent, carrying secrets that could unravel if spoken. The coded message, partially decoded and yet still incomprehensible, haunted their thoughts. Its mystery, like a phantom, would accompany them for decades, a puzzle whose full meaning might never be known. In the shadowed corners of the hospital, fragments of humanity persisted. A nurse helped a soldier sit up, brushing away grime and soot from his uniform, murmuring reassurances that felt as much for herself as for him. Another doctor shared a scant morsel of bread with a child who had wandered among the ruins, eyes wide with confusion and fear. These small acts, fleeting and fragile, became the anchors for sanity, the only light piercing the oppressive darkness that had ruled the night. Yet even in these moments of compassion, the weight of the unspeakable pressed down, the decisions made under duress, the lives lost, the secrets kept, and then the haunting truth emerged with clarity. Much of the evidence from that night had vanished. Diaries, files, testimonies, erased, hidden, destroyed. One notebook, rumored to contain the full names, locations, and accounts of the events, had disappeared without a trace. Who had taken it and why? The survivors could only speculate, their minds circling endless possibilities, knowing that speaking any of it aloud could place them in danger or reopen wounds too deep to confront. And yet, the absence of that notebook amplified the mystery, leaving historians and future generations with questions that demanded answers that might never come. Hours passed, and the light of morning illuminated the full extent of devastation. Broken instruments, abandoned supplies, and the scattered remnants of human lives lay like silent witnesses to the night's chaos. Yet amidst the ruin, traces of courage endured. Eyes met across ruined corridors, hands clasped in fleeting gestures of comfort. Whispers of reassurance shared with those too traumatized to speak openly. Each survivor carried their own story, a story of fear, sacrifice, and resilience etched into memory but locked behind silence. As the survivors exited the hospital, the city stretched before them like a canvas of ruin and resilience. The chaos of war had left its mark, but human courage persisted, stubborn and luminous. Each woman, each nurse, each doctor bore a silent testimony, story too dangerous or painful to tell fully, yet impossible to erase. And for those who would later hear fragments of these accounts, the lesson was clear. Courage often exists in silence, and some truths remain hidden, haunting, and unspoken. Finally, the camera of history closes on the hospital. Survivors moving into the light of a new day, their faces marked by grief and unbroken resolve. And though the war would rage on elsewhere, the secrets, the courage, and the horrors witnessed within these walls remained locked in memory. For viewers, the chilling realization lingered, the truth about these female doctors. The impossible choices they made, the horrors they endured, and the courage they displayed remains hidden in archives, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. The faint rustle of pages, the echo of footsteps, and the lingering shadows of the night left a sense of awe, suspense, and haunting curiosity that no one could forget in the silence that followed. One thought remained: the unspeakable acts of courage, the forbidden knowledge, and the mysteries of survival were not just history, they were warnings, lessons, and stories yet to be fully told. And in that silence, the female doctors spoke louder than any words ever could, leaving a haunting imprint on the collective memory of all who would seek to understand the true cost of war.